The morning the angriest man in my courtroom turned out to be the most broken. In 41 years on this bench in Kansas City, Missouri, I have learned one thing above almost everything else. Anger is almost never about what it says it is about. I have seen anger that was really grief, anger that was really shame, anger that was really a man standing at the edge of something he could not fix, staring down into it and having no other language for what he felt. But I want to tell you about the Thursday morning that a man named Robert Delaney walked into my courtroom looking like he wanted to take the whole room apart with his bare hands. And what I found underneath all that fury was the last thing any of us in that room expected. If you believe that every angry person deserves one question before they receive a verdict, subscribe right now, because what happened that morning changed how I think about the word difficult. It was a Thursday in September, that particular kind of early fall morning where the air is still warm, but something in it has already turned. The summer is over. You can feel it. The city knows. My clerk, a man named Gerald, who has worked beside me for 14 years and who was seen enough in this courtroom that very little surprises him, handed me the morning docket at 8:15. He set it on my desk. Then he said, flatly, with the economy of a man who does not waste words, Delaney's the fourth one, fair warning. Gerald does not give fair warnings unless they are warranted. I looked at the file. Respondent, Robert Delaney, 52. Charges, 3 counts of aggressive driving, 2 counts of illegal parking in restricted zones, 1 count of verbal altercation with a parking enforcement officer. 6 violations total, 6 weeks. 6 violations in 6 weeks. That was not ordinary carelessness. That was something systematic, something going wrong. I noted it. I walked to the bench. When Gerald called his name, the courtroom door opened, and Robert Delaney came through it like a man walking into a confrontation he had been preparing for. He was broad-shouldered, big, the kind of build that suggests physical work, years of it. He wore a flannel shirt and work trousers, heavy boots, his hands hanging at his sides were the hands of someone who has spent decades using them, thick-knuckled, scarred in the small ways that come from tools and labor. He was 52 years old, but he moved with the tension of someone much younger, the coiled, forward-leaning energy of a man who was ready to argue before a word has been spoken. He sat down. He did not look around the room. He looked straight ahead, jaw set, eyes fixed on the bench, with an expression that I would describe, honestly, as barely managed hostility. No attorney beside him, alone. I said, "Good morning, Mr. Delaney." He said, "Morning." One word. No, Your Honor. No adjustment of posture. He said it the way you say something when you have decided in advance not to give an inch. I have been doing this long enough not to take that personally, but I noted it. I said, "Mr. Delaney, you're here today on 6 violations accumulated between August 1st and September 12th. That's a significant number of incidents in a short period of time. Before we go through each one, I want to ask you a straightforward question." He looked at me. "Are you all right?" Something moved across his face, fast, gone almost before it appeared, but I saw it. He said, "I'm fine. Can we just get through this?" I said, "We'll get through it." But I've been on this bench for 41 years, and when I see 6 violations in 6 weeks from someone with a clean record before that, I looked at his file, and you do have a clean record, Mr. Delaney. Nothing before August 1st. Nothing. That tells me something changed. And before I decide what to do about what's in front of me, I want to understand what changed. He looked at the table. He said, "Nothing changed. I've been busy. I've been distracted. Can we move on?" I said, "We can. Tell me about the first incident, August 4th. Aggressive driving on Troost Avenue. The officer's report says you cut across 2 lanes without signaling and nearly sideswiped a delivery truck. I was in a hurry. Where were you going?" A pause. A medical facility. Which one? He shifted in his seat. Research Medical Center, over on Meyer. I said, were you ill? He looked at me with those set eyes and said, with the particular flatness of a man saying something he has said many times and has stopped feeling, it wasn't for me. I set down the file. I folded my hands. I said, Mr. Delaney, who were you going to see? The silence lasted about 4 seconds. 4 seconds is a long time in a courtroom. Long enough for 12 people in the gallery to lean forward without knowing they were doing it. Long enough for Gerald at his desk to go very still. Robert Delaney looked at the table. Then he said, in a voice that had changed in register from the flat, hostile voice he had come in with, lower now, rougher at the edges, my wife. I said, what's her name? He looked up, briefly, as if checking whether the question was serious. It was. Carol, he said. What's happening with Carol? He put his hands flat on the table in front of him. He looked at them, big working hands, the hands of a man who was used to fixing things. He said, she had a stroke, July 28th, in the kitchen. I was in the garage. She was making coffee, and she fell, and I heard the cup break on the floor, and he stopped. He pressed his lips together. He started again. She's at Research Medical, has been since July 28th. She's doing therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy. She can't drive. She can't. He stopped again, chose a different word. There are things she can't do right now that she used to do. I said, and you're going to see her every day. Twice a day, he said, before work and after. I work construction. I'm a foreman. I can't always leave when I want to. Sometimes I'm running, trying to get there before visiting hours end, trying to get there before she. He stopped. The room was very quiet. I said, gently, before she what? He looked at his hands. Before she gets scared, he said. She gets scared in the evening sometimes. She doesn't always know where she is. She needs me there. She's always needed me there, and now she needs me even more. And I can't always be there. And I'm trying. I am trying. But work doesn't stop, and the bills don't stop, and the hospital doesn't stop. And I am one person, and I keep making these stupid mistakes on the road because my head is somewhere else entirely. And I know it's wrong. I know it. He stopped. He breathed. He said very quietly, I just need to get to her. The courtroom was absolutely still. Not the polite stillness of people being respectful, the deeper stillness of people who have received something they were not prepared for and are absorbing it privately, each one alone in the same room. I heard from the gallery the small and unmistakable sound of someone trying not to cry. Gerald at his desk had a particular stillness that I have seen before. The stillness he uses when he needs a moment and doesn't have one. I looked at Robert Delaney, who would come into my courtroom radiating the kind of anger that fills up a room and pushes back anyone who gets close. And I saw what was underneath it now, fully and plainly. He was exhausted, not tired. Exhausted in the way a person gets when they have been running for weeks on fear and love and the particular desperation of someone who cannot solve the problem that matters most and cannot stop trying. He had not told the officers who cited him. I understood why without asking. You can see the pride in him, the kind of pride that is not arrogance. It is the self-sufficiency of a man who has spent his whole life being the one who handles things, who fixes things, who does not put his troubles on someone else's doorstep. So he had driven too fast and parked wrong and snapped at an officer doing his job and said nothing true to any of them because saying the true thing would have required him to say out loud that he was drowning. I know that kind of pride. My father had it. So did I, for a long time, until I learned better. I said, Mr. Delaney, how long has Carol been in therapy? 7 weeks. How is she progressing? He exhaled. The breath carried more in it than just air. Slowly. The doctors say slowly is actually good. They say the brain needs time to find new pathways. She got her full name back 2 weeks ago. She can say it clearly. Carol Ann Delaney. He said it with a precision that told me he had been listening carefully to every small victory, memorizing them. She's working on sentences. I said, "Does she know how often you come?" He said, "Every time I walk in, she looks at me the same way she's looked at me since we met, like I just did something worth noticing by showing up." He paused. 28 years. She still looks at me like that. From the gallery, the small sound was not so small anymore. I said, "And your work, your crew, who's managing when you're at the hospital?" "My assistant foreman. He's good, he handles it." A pause. "I have to trust him more than I'm used to. That's been its own thing to get used to." I nodded. I said, "Mr. Delaney, I want to ask you something, and I want you to hear it as a genuine question, not a criticism." He looked at me. "Is there anyone helping you?" He blinked. "What do you mean?" "With Carol's care, with transportation to appointments, with the evenings when she gets scared and you're still at work. Is there anyone?" He was quiet for a moment, a different kind of quiet than before. "Our son lives in Denver," he said. "He's been trying to get time to come. His job is complicated." He paused. "Our daughter comes on weekends. She has 3 kids of her own." He paused again. "Carol's sister calls every day. She would come, but she's in Phoenix, and she's not well herself." He looked at his hands. "It's mostly me," he said. "It's mostly been me." I made my decision. But before I ruled, I wanted to say something. Because the ruling was the easy part, the easier part anyway. What this man actually needed was harder to give, and more important than any fine I could waive or reduce. I said, "Mr. Delaney, let me tell you what I see when I look at this file." He looked up. "I see a man with a completely clean record before July 28th. Not a single violation, not a parking ticket, nothing. And then I see 6 incidents in 6 weeks. Every single one of them happening between his work site and research medical center." I paused. "I do not see a man who stopped caring about the law. I see a man who was trying to be in 2 places at once, every single day, for someone he loves, and who was running on empty and making mistakes he would never have made before because his mind and his heart are not on the road. They are in a hospital room on Meyer Boulevard." His jaw moved. He looked at the table. I continued. "Here is what I need you to hear, and I need you to actually hear it, not just wait for me to finish. You cannot keep doing this alone. Not because you aren't capable. You clearly are. But because no one person is built to carry what you are carrying without support. No one. Not the strongest man in this room. Not me. Not anyone." He nodded once. Small. The nod of someone hearing something true that they have been resisting. "I'm going to dismiss 5 of these 6 violations," I said. "The 5 that occurred en route to or from the hospital." I heard him exhale. "The 6th, the altercation with the parking officer, I'm keeping. Not to punish you, but because I want you to remember it. Because that officer was doing his job, and the day is going to come when your head clears enough to feel badly about that moment. And when it does, I want you to write him an apology, a real one, not a form apology, a real one." He said, "I already feel badly about it." "I know you do," I said. "That's why I believe you'll write the letter." I set down the file. "The fine for that 6th violation is $200. I'm not waiving it, but I am doing something else." I looked at Gerald. Gerald, who had been ready for this since I first saw where the conversation was going, brought a piece of paper to the bench. He had printed it during the last few minutes. I had asked him to do that with a look, the kind of look that comes from 14 years of working side by side. I said, "I'm giving you a list. There is a program through Research Medical Center for family caregivers of stroke patients. They have case managers whose entire job is to coordinate support for families in exactly your situation. Transportation assistance, respite services, support groups for spouses, social workers who know every resource in this city. I held it out toward him. He stood, walked up and took it. He looked at it. He said, quietly, "I didn't know this existed." "Most people don't," I said. "They're too busy trying to handle everything alone to look for it." He folded the paper carefully, put it in his shirt pocket. "Mr. Delaney," I said, "one more thing." He looked at me. "Carol needs you to be whole for her. Not perfect, whole. And right now you are running yourself down to nothing. Every time you speed through an intersection because your mind is somewhere else, you are at risk. Every time you drive exhausted and distracted, you are at risk. And if something happens to you," I let that sit for just a moment. "If something happens to you on the road, who goes to Carol in the evenings when she gets scared?" His eyes filled. He pressed his lips together with the particular firmness of a man who has decided he is not going to cry in public and is having to work hard to keep that decision. He said in a voice that was just barely steady, "Nobody." "Nobody," I said. "So taking care of yourself is not a luxury, Robert. It is the most important thing you can do for her right now. Call that number today, not next week, today." He nodded. "Yes, Your Honor," he said. And this time, he said it. He was almost to the door when he stopped. He turned around. The gallery, the people who had come in that morning with their own parking tickets and expired registrations and ordinary Thursday concerns, were watching him. He said to the room, as much as to me, "I'm sorry for how I walked in here. I was ready to fight with somebody. I've been ready to fight with somebody for 7 weeks." He paused. "You're the first person who asked how I was." He turned and walked out. The courtroom sat with that for a moment. Then a woman in the second row, perhaps 60 years old, said quietly to no one in particular, "Lord have mercy," which was exactly the right thing to say. Gerald called me 4 days later with an update, the way he sometimes does on the cases that stay with us. He had heard from a clerk at Research Medical that a man named Robert Delaney had come into the Caregiver Services office on Thursday afternoon, the same day as his court appearance, and had sat down with a case manager for an hour and a half. They had arranged a medical transport service for Carol's therapy days. They had connected him with a stroke family support group that met Wednesday evenings, 2 blocks from his home. They had found him a social worker who was going to help navigate insurance questions that had been piling up on his kitchen table for weeks. He had also, by Gerald's account, come back to the parking enforcement office and asked to speak to the officer he had argued with. He had apologized in person. The officer, a man named Torres, had shaken his hand. 6 weeks after that Thursday morning, a card arrived at the courthouse. A plain card. A photograph of autumn trees on the front. Inside, 2 messages. The first was in a man's handwriting. Familiar, wide, and direct. "Judge, Carol started full sentences last week. Real ones. She said, 'Bobby, bring me my blue sweater.' First full request she's made since July. I've never been so happy about a sweater in my life. Call the caregiver people like you told me. Don't know why I waited as long as I did. Thank you for seeing past the way I came in that morning. Robert Delaney." Below that, in a second handwriting, slower, careful, the deliberate letters of someone relearning something. "Thank you for taking care of my Bobby. Carol." I read that twice. Then I set it on my desk, and I sat for a few minutes, and I thought about Carol Delaney relearning how to hold a pen, relearning how to form letters, choosing, with the words she had so carefully recovered, to write a thank you note to a judge she had never met, because her husband had come home that Thursday and told her what happened, and she had wanted him to know she knew. I thought about that for a long time. I want to tell you what Robert Delaney reminded me of that September morning. He reminded me that the people who are hardest to be patient with are usually the ones who most need patience extended to them. Not because they deserve special treatment, but because beneath the hardness, there is almost always something soft that has been protecting itself the only way it knows how. He walked into my courtroom ready to fight, because fighting was the one thing he still felt capable of. Everything else, medicine, time, the slow work of healing, the question of whether Carol would be fully Carol again, none of that was in his hands. He could not fix it. He could not force it. He could only show up twice a day and hope. And when a person cannot fix the thing that matters most, sometimes the anger goes sideways, onto traffic officers, onto parking restrictions, onto the nearest available target that is small enough to push back against. My father understood that. He used to say, when a man is angry about small things, look for the large thing he cannot say. I looked for it that morning. I found a husband driving too fast on Troost Avenue because he needed to get to his wife before the evening fear came and she was alone in it. That is not a villain. That is just a person in over their head, loving someone, trying. The job of this bench, my job, the job I have tried to honor for 41 years, is not only to apply the law, it is to see the person the law is being applied to, fully, without flinching. That sometimes means asking a question that has nothing to do with the charges. That sometimes means saying, I see you, not just your violations, you. And sometimes that is the most important thing a courtroom can do. If this story reached something in you, if it reminded you of someone in your life who has been hard to be around lately, someone whose edges have gotten sharp, someone who seems like they are angry all the time, I want to ask you something. Have you asked them if they're okay? Not in passing, not a quick, you all right, that doesn't expect an honest answer. A real question, given with real time and real attention. You might be surprised what you find underneath. Leave me a comment. Tell me about a time when someone looked past your difficult surface and asked what was really going on. Or tell me about a time you did that for someone else. I read every one, every comment, because your stories remind me, on the long days, why this work still matters. God bless Robert Delaney. God bless Carol with her blue sweater and her returning words. And God bless all of you watching this, especially those of you who are driving too fast right now because your mind is somewhere else entirely. Pull over, take a breath, call somebody. It is not weakness to need help. It is the most human thing there is. I will see you next week.